Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see so many people here this evening. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome all of you here. My responsibilities at the Institute include our policy programs, of which this is one, and we're very proud of, our public programs, programs like the Aspen Ideas Festival, and our network of international partners around the world, most of them in Europe and Asia, but I'm delighted to say we also now have one in Mexico, which has a very nice connection to our program, Latinos and Society. Today's program is, of course, a conversation with Justice Sonia Sotomayor. I'm thrilled that she's here. She was actually my law school classmate and has been an inspiration to people who've known her at any point in her illustrious career. And the topic couldn't be more important, and that, of course, is the importance of civic participation. The Aspen Institute was founded almost 70 years ago. We used to always say 60 years ago, and then I did my arithmetic and said, we really shouldn't say that anymore. It's almost 70 years ago now, as a place to bring diverse groups together to find common ground, a venue for nonpartisan dialogue on critical issues facing our nation, our society, and the world, and in commitment to fundamental democratic values and, frankly, the everlasting quest to define and create what we refer to as the good society. It was because of precisely these reasons, frankly, that we established the Latinos and Society Program just a couple of years ago. It's the only program we think of its kind. That is a program focused on Latinos and non-Latinos alike, and at an established nonpartisan institution that itself is not a Latino advocacy organization. We thought it was incredibly important to demonstrate the importance of these issues, not to the Hispanic community in the United States, which of course already understands that, but to all other communities, in particular leaders of all other sectors of society. The program is to bring people together, Latinos and non-Latinos, to really tackle our shared challenges in benefit for the larger good of the nation. It does this by focusing on three critical policy areas with the highest probability of influencing the success of Latinos and the success of the nation. Civic participation is the first of those, educational achievement, and educational advancement. Now it's a particularly critical time to be breaking out of silos and having conversations about just how interconnected our futures are in this country, Latinos and non-Latinos alike. And we, of course, are on the verge of a sea change in the demographics of the country to an increasingly more diverse population, with projected growth of the Latino community estimated to reach 1/3 of the population by the year 2060. So understanding each other, working closely and collaboratively with each other has never been more important. It is now my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce Monica Lozano, who is chair of Latinos and Society Program. She was former chair of Impromedia, one of the largest media companies serving the Hispanic population in this country. And I'd like to just specifically note the significance of her choice to work with the Aspen Institute after stepping down from that extraordinarily important role in business and the media. And that is very simply because she is so passionate about the role and mission of the Latinos and Society Program, and I think it's important to say, of civic engagement itself, of which she is herself an extraordinary example. Monica?
Thank you, Elliot. And thank you all so much for being here. We're just honored by your presence and so excited to be able to share this evening with you. As Elliot said, I am the chair of the Latinos and Society Program, and just, again, very honored to have you here. As Elliot mentioned, it was only 2 years ago, 2015, when the Latinos and Society Program was founded here at the Aspen Institute. And precisely as he mentioned, because we thought it was so important for an institute like the Aspen Institute, with the credibility, the reputation, the ability to work across partisan lines, to bring people together regardless of background, ethnicity, the industry sector in which they work, that by collaborating together, it is this collective action that we are able to really advance what America stands for, which is an inclusive country built on basic values. And if we think about the future of the United States, we cannot avoid what is absolutely inevitable because of these demographic changes that Elliot mentioned. 18% today, 30% in just a generation. And that means those millions of people have to be invested in today. We have to build bridges, we have to build networks, we have to build leadership, and our ability to do that here at the Aspen Institute is precisely the place where we can make this connectivity about the future of America and the necessity to focus on the future of the Latino community. So we have 3 policy areas that we focus on: economic advancement, educational attainment, and civic engagement. And last year, for all the obvious reasons, we really focused on civic engagement. And we were able to convene twice at the Aspen Institute Retreat Center, first to do a deep dive on what we called unlocking the potential of Latino civic participation. And then we brought a second time a group of younger people really focused on the millennial generation, some of them are with us today, to really understand that this isn't a generational thing, and it's not just about voting. It is about being engaged in the country, the community, the networks in which we participate and are exposed. So out of those 2 convenings came a number of recommendations. We absolutely understand that there are certain barriers, but we also understand that there is way for us to move forward. And it is that collective action around engagement that we really want to focus on, the solutions to the barriers that do not necessarily allow people to fully participate. And there is no one person who is not. Let me start over. There's only one person in my mind who really represents the values of civic participation, the commitment to democracy, the commitment to inclusion of different voices, and that is our special guest tonight, Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and we are just so excited to have her here. So as you all know, I'll just give you a brief background. Justice Sotomayor, born in Bronx, New York, of course, graduated summa cum laude from Princeton University, earned her JD from Yale. She served in the U.S. District Court, Southern District of New York, and on the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And it was in 2009 that President Barack Obama nominated her as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, a role that she assumed in August of that year. And of course, we celebrate in this room the fact that she is the first Hispanic to serve on the highest court in the land, and in December 2016 was awarded the Tisch Award from the Aspen Institute in recognition of her values-based leadership. So Justice Sotomayor will be interviewed by Abigail Golden-Vazquez, who is the founding executive director of the Latinos and Society Program. Prior to serving as executive director, Abigail, for 8 years, managed the Institute's Aspen Global Leadership Network with the goal of stimulating a new generation of local leaders to play an even greater role in the social and political development of their countries. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Abigail Golden-Vazquez and Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Monica, for those kind words, and thank you all for being here with us tonight.
Go. Too far from me. Move this closer.
Okay. Okay.
And we should be closer to you.
Okay. Whatever you say. Hola, mi amor.
Okay.
So let me start by saying just how honored and privileged I feel to be on this stage here with you tonight.
You know, that's so strange for you to say something. I so admire the work you're doing here with the Institute and the educational program that you're undertaking that I feel privileged to be meeting you. So, thank you.
As a fellow New Yorican, you are a personal hero of mine and a role model of mine.
So few people call me that here. I miss it.
Right?
Yeah.
There's only a handful of Puerto Ricans that have reached this national appeal, the crossover appeal that you have. We have Roberto Clemente, we have Rita Moreno, we have now Lin-Manuel Miranda, and we have you, Sonia Sotomayor.
You know, years ago I was at a Hispanic Bar Association meeting, and one of the speakers said, you know, it's very difficult for us in the Latino community to find common ground. And now we share one thing together. That's Ricky Martin. It was when I was a district court judge, and I was heavily involved in my work, and I had to turn to somebody and say, who's that? They were embarrassed for me. So.
I am too, a little bit. So I just want to say how important it is to have role models like you, because your story lifts up the power of hard work, of perseverance, and public service. And why that's so important is because in doing so, you offer a model to others that no matter where they come from or what they may have to overcome, that achieving the unimaginable is possible. So on behalf of myself, my son Gabriel, who's sitting in the audience over there. Levántate, Gabriel. Levántate, mi amor.
Gabriel, I'm 62 years old. My mother's going to be 90 years old in June, and she still embarrasses me. There's no hope. Just smile, shake your head, and let her do what she wants, okay?
And also on behalf of my mother, who is a nurse like your mother, I want to thank you so much for opening the doors of opportunity and for showing how it can be done. I could go on, but today we're here to have a conversation about civic participation, an issue that I know is near and dear to your heart and is incredibly important to the work of the Latinos and Society Program at the Aspen Institute. So just a little bit on the format for everyone here. We're going to spend about 35 minutes in conversation amongst ourselves, and then we're going to open up to the audience for 15 minutes or so of question and answer. And then we'll come back to the stage for a short wrap-up. And then I invite everyone to join us next door for a reception. So without further ado, justice. The bedrock of any healthy democracy rests on the active participations of all of its citizens. Civically engaged people reach higher levels of education, they make more money, and they have better health outcomes. And yet, there's a large gap between the wealthy and the less so in terms of who has access to civic opportunity. And this, coupled with a recent decline over the last 30 years in civic participation, even with a recent uptick, is deeply disconcerting for our democracy. From where you sit, what would you say about the state of America's civic culture, and what can we do to reignite civic spirit in Americans?
I think, well, let me start from the initiative that I've just recently become involved in to try to be a catalyst in that involvement. My colleague, Sandra Day O'Connor, is no longer traveling the way she used to. And although she still has some work that she does with iCivics, the organization that she founded, I've now taken her place on the board, and I'm the one traveling, okay? And so why did I join the iCivics board? Let's start from my first assumption. We are never going to reach equality in America, as Latinos, as Black, as anything, until we achieve equality in education. That's the bedrock of my understanding of why we're unequal in this society and what we need to change if we want to ever reach the aspiration of all people being equal, not just under law, but of equal in participation in our society. Since I started from that premise and believe it so strongly, I know that unless we engage kids from when they're kids in understanding the importance of their involvement, not in their society, but in their community, in understanding that none of us can afford to be bystanders in life. We can't let things happen to us. How many people have you heard, particularly in the last few months, saying, that's what they do in Washington. That's what you let them do in Washington. And that's the message I carry all the time, which is we create our community. And we create it by being active participants in our community. And I'm not talking just about voting, because voting is just one aspect of civic involvement. I'm not talking about writing letters to congressmen or to presidents or to whomever else you want to write to. I'm talking about being involved in bettering the relationships of people in your community. And everybody, has different strengths and different weaknesses. Some people are more outgoing than others. Some people like doing some things more than others. We have an obligation to pick the thing that we want to do. But the only way you can do that is by knowing what's available to you. That's why I think civic education for younger kids is so important. And that's what iCivics does. Through games, the mediums that engages most kids, we teach them about our democracy, about our system of government, and about the rights and the obligations that they have in that system. Since I've joined the board, I've now been an active participant in 3 new initiatives for iCivics. The first one is we're moving into high schools, because I don't think this is something that we should stop just in middle school. We should be continuing civic education throughout every child's educational experience, including college, by the way, and law school, particularly if we ever get our kids there, okay? And every time I speak at law schools, I tell them we're not doing enough about teaching lawyers to be citizen lawyers first. Not lawyers first, but citizen lawyers first. Secondly, we are moving or starting an initiative at iCivics where we're taking the lessons kids are learning and creating programs for teachers to take their kids out to do actually some civic projects in their communities. We're working on models on how teachers can do that. And the third thing, probably the one nearest and dearest to my heart because I initiated it, it's what got me involved in iCivics, was a phone call encouraging them to consider this initiative, and that got me on the board. My assistant then told me, would you stop making calls? But I'm working with the board, and the entire board and staff of iCivics, in starting a project that will make the games accessible to English as a second language students and to poor readers. 1/3 of our public education kids across the country now speak a second language first. And as all of you in this room probably know, we will be the biggest minority group, Spanish-speaking kids, in the next 10 years. And so if we want those children to become more involved, we have to teach them as well. And so this initiative has just started. In May, we're going to have the first meeting with experts to tell us how we can change the games or need to change the games and improve them. So kids with reading disabilities and kids who don't speak English well can access the games and get the same lessons other kids are getting from it. But if you start as I do, that what law is service between lawyers and the community in how to organize our relationships with each other, how we figure out to balance the competing needs that different members of our communities have, and the ways in which limited resources can affect the sharing both of responsibilities and obligations. If that's what lawyers do, we only do it because we are a part of that giving to society. But we need people in our society to understand that we have to work together as a community to better every aspect of what we do. Not just voting, but whether it's being active in your school, in your church, in helping the homeless in your neighborhood, of going to read to elders who can't read well anymore. It doesn't really matter how you do it, so long as you're not being a bystander and accepting the problems in our communities as things that can't be fixed. We may not be able to solve all problems, but if everybody takes a little piece of every problem, we'll go a long way.
Thank you. Well, in your remarks just now, you alluded to the fact that civic participation isn't one single act. It's not voting. It consists of many different acts toward public good. In your wonderful book, My Beloved World, you talked about several things like joining the debate team and volunteering at the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital and joining the Third World Center, saying who says that anymore, Third World Center at Princeton. How has that helped to form your civic identity?
You know, I was telling you before we came in that when I was at Yale, I had 4 brothers. They were all older than I was, and they acted like big brothers, bullying me, pushing me around, but also protecting me. And one was African American, another was Native American, the third was Puerto Rican, and the fourth was Mexican. And when I look at the texture of my life, I believe that the fact that I understood somewhere early on that involvement wasn't limited either to my gender or my ethnicity or to anything, but to my belonging to my community, that understanding has carried itself throughout my life. In every role that I have served, I not only continue to participate in whatever Hispanic issues I can, but I join the larger community in addressing the questions that are important to it because I'm a part of that community too. I don't see lines the way other people do. I don't see the law as black and white. You know, most people expect the law to tell you how to do things. You hire lawyers and you have judges in our society because the law is rarely that clear. If answers were that simple, we could put the problems into computers and let the computers spit out the answers. But we know we can't do that. And the reason for that is that the law interacts with all of our gray areas. And that's how we have to live, understanding that it's not one thing, it's a lot of things. And we're not part of one little community, we're a part of a larger community.
I appreciate that as a Jewish Puerto Rican who has to cross over many lines and does not see things in black and white terms at all, and has been something that I have always, strove to kind of see the big picture And speaking of identity, we talk a lot about Latino Americans, or at least I do as director of the Latinos and Society Program. But I think it's really important to point out that there's no one single Latino identity. We come in all shapes, sizes, colors, ideologies, and religions. As I pointed out to my husband when we were dating early on, and he told me I didn't look Latina, we straightened that out real quick.
Most of my life, most people haven't thought I was Latina either. When I got my curly hair back, they did.
I got my curly hair back too.
Yeah,
it helps.
It helps.
There are some characteristics, however, I think that we can generalize about and say that Latinos are known for. And those are things like hard work, family values, belief in the value of education, and an incredible entrepreneurial spirit. Latinos are starting businesses at 4 times the rest of the population. And yet we continue to lag behind in civic participation.
Well, let's be honest. If you're working 14 hours a day in your job, it is hard to make time for civic participation. And for many, many Latinos, that's the quality of their life. How many of you, my own mother included, had 2 jobs, her regular job and her part-time job. By the time she finished working her work week, she was exhausted. And we have to engage with that reality, which is it's very hard to motivate people who are working that hard and who barely have time to sit and themselves ever and take a deep breath to think about involving themselves in other people's problems. However, that's why I think teaching civic involvement as a bettering, not of the world, but perhaps of just your immediate community, becomes more palatable and easier to sell. Because my mother taught me that. My mother was the nurse to our housing project and to the co-op we subsequently lived in. She's the one who started to teach me about civic involvement and about our responsibility as individuals to help others. And that, I think, every Latino does intuitively. That's why we have such extended families. How many Latino families in this room have adopted someone whose parent died, whose family member has been ill or something else? That's a Latino hallmark. We all have adopted brothers and sisters, adopted titis and tios, whatever else. So we have an idea about it. If we could actually talk about it within those terms, we might get us more involved.
You hear that, Chris? That's why there's a revolving door in our house all the time. Now you know.
Yeah, no. But I don't think it's going to be easy when we have a community like we do that is still not a completely professional community, where manual labor is the hallmark of our living, and as a result, it requires hours.
Well, you pointed out that Latinos are to be the largest minority. In fact, by 2060, Latinos are projected to be 30% of the US population. And if you pair that with the under-participation, or at least in official measures of under-civic participation, what's at stake for our country and what can we do to turn this around?
What's at stake for our country is losing all that talent. Because there's a whole lot of talent in that pool that could be put to great use in helping our society. That you always lose when you underutilize any group, whether it was women, and the country found out not so long ago what they were missing out on by not having us in the workforce. But look how hard people resisted. And it's the same thing whether it's women or blacks or Native Americans or Latinos. We lose out on an enormous talent pool. What would have happened to Lin Miranda if his parents had not been the civic leaders of our community? I don't know if Hamilton would have been born, because it is Lin Miranda's America that's reflected in Hamilton. And that America he saw through the eyes of his parents, who are great, and were and still are great civic leaders in our community. That's the kind of thing we'll miss out on if we don't find a way to motivate our community to show its strength and take more active participation in not letting laws happen to us, but in ensuring that we take a part, and an active part, in ensuring that the laws that are made are not hurting us.
Well, and you queued me up perfectly, I have to say this. This is precisely why the Latinos and Society Program, out of the gate, when we launched 2.5 years ago, took on this issue of civic participation. And we've gathered, as Monica said early, 2 groups of people who are coming up with ideas and solutions and projects precisely to address this issue of low civic participation among Latinos and ensure that we can improve that situation for the good of the whole country. Our perspective is always that, we're the Latinos in Society Program, but we're not doing this just for Latinos. We see that Latinos are critical to the future of all America, like Lin-Manuel is part of the fabric of our American culture and our American society. And so that's where we come from, and that's, how we approach this. But coming now to current times, between 2012 and 2016, we saw an unprecedented number of millennials become eligible to vote for the first time in their lives. And at the same time, we experienced one of the most contentious election processes that we've seen in our times. And many people left feeling more disillusioned with the whole process. And so I would just ask you, what would you say to people who are feeling disillusioned and frustrated by the process?
You let it happen. I think that any time you're disillusioned by any election or by anything that happens, you have to stop by saying who's responsible. Because just as I started with saying we're not bystanders, whatever happens, happens because we don't take control and ensure that our voices are heard. Look at how close the last election was. Every time I look at people, I want to ask them, did you vote? And every Latino who complains to me, that's the first question I ask. If you could vote, did you vote? My point is, we don't have a right to despair. Because desperation leads you to the end of your life. What's left once you walk away? All the bad things you hate, all the things that you think are wrong, and you've done absolutely nothing to change them. At the end of my life, when I put my head on that pillow, I want to be able to look at myself and say, I tried. If you can't say that, you can't claim a meaningful life. And that's what spurs me on in everything I do. The thought that if we give up hope, we have nothing left to live for. And there's too much at stake for the people I love, for the community that is such an integral part of who I am, for the children that I want to grow up and have the world that I thought I inhabited, and to have the future that I imagined for them. We can only together, working at it, can we make that happen. If you let it go, then what's your life worth? My life is worth my effort. So's yours.
Wow. That was deeply powerful. So I think we're getting close to the time when we're going to move to the audience. The time is just flying. When we're going to move to the audience for Q&A. So start thinking about your questions. Before that, I'm going to ask my last question.
Okay. Just remind them that I won't tell you how we're going to rule on any case.
Oh, I'll get to that. Don't worry. I'll get that. I have an announcement.
All right.
I'm prepared.
Okay.
So what would you tell those in the room and those who will be watching on video, many of whom have access to resources, to influence, to power, that they could personally do to improve the state of civic participation? In other words, if you had a call to action for this group, what would it be?
Take one child in your life and engage them in something to help their community. And I don't care what it is, whether it's take them on a field trip to feed the homeless at a center, take them to a nursing home and have them meet and talk to someone there for the afternoon. But take one child in your life and show them the meaning of helping someone else. Don't assume that kids know what that means. You have to actually get them to participate in doing it. The second thing is put them on a computer and show them iCivic.org. And play a game with them. And I challenge you, if you can't answer all of the questions the right way, you better play all the games too.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to turn to the audience in a second, but as the Justice alluded to, we do have some ground rules to share. For reasons I'm sure that you can understand, the Justice cannot answer any questions on issues that may come before the court, any pending cases, statutes, or proposed legislation, or questions related to the pending nomination or Supreme Court nominee. Please also wait for one of us to call on you and wait for a microphone. I know everyone gets up and they say, oh, I have a loud voice, but we are recording this for posterity, so that will not get captured if you don't wait for the mic before speaking. And finally, remember to state your name and affiliation, and please keep the questions short so that, unlike me, keep the questions short so that we can get in as many as possible.
Now, for those of you who have read my book, you will know that as a child I had boundless energy. And I don't have as much now as I had then, but I hate sitting still. So I'm going to walk around. But you see this lady, and there's a lot of other guys around the room. They're here to protect me from myself. They don't like me walking around, but I'm going to do it anyway. But you can't jump up unexpectedly because it scares them. And if they get too scared, they pull me off the floor. And I don't want that to happen. So raise your hand. I'll come over. I even give hugs occasionally. And there are friends in the audience, so I will be giving some hugs. But do stay seated. How's that until you're called on?
That sounds good. So I'm going to take the prerogative of moderator, and I'm going to call on the first person. I'm going to call on Miguel Blancarte, who's sitting right over here in the second row.
Miguel, she's planned this from the beginning.
Miguel.
Oops, sorry, I'm not very elegant at this.
Miguel is one of the participants in our civic participation gathering of millennials.
Hello.
And
Hi
they were
there.
here today
Thank you so
working
much.
on some projects.
Fine, thank you. ¿De dónde eres, Miguel?
De Chicago.
De Chicago. Bien frío en este tiempo.
Muy frío. Mucha nieve y mucho hielo.
I know. You did better moving here.
Justice Sotomayor, on behalf of a cohort of millennials who convened to address Latino millennial civic engagement in the United States, we thank you for addressing the importance of civic engagement. Furthermore, we thank you for the struggles and sacrifices that you've endured, which earned you your seat on the United States Supreme Court. You're a true inspiration to us. Our question addresses civic engagement and providing opportunity in aiding a community that time after time again continues to be disenfranchised. Ironically enough, this community is at the fabric of our nation. It is the backbone of our country, undocumented immigrants. Opportunity is an ideal deeply embedded in the American values of equity, fairness, and mobility. Opportunity means that everyone has a fair chance to achieve his or her full potential. Taking into consideration your background, your upbringing, and experiences, How do you think Latino millennials can civically activate in order to provide opportunity for the undocumented population in the United States and also for all Latino millennials?
Well, look, there are so many different things that can be done, okay? It's hard to pick on one thing and say there's a magic bullet solution. There is no magic bullet solution. This is a problem that has to be addressed on so many levels. We need more lawyers at the borders. We need more lawyers helping immigrants who are coming here and are here to help regularize their status and to try to give them advice about what their alternatives are in terms of coming into the country. There are all sorts of different reasons for why people can stay here, and so you have to learn about what those reasons are, but we need more people involved in ensuring that entering immigrants are given proper legal advice, but are also given proper aid in helping them figure out how to regularize their status here. Secondly, we need people involved in this continuing conversation. I'm not taking a side on the issue, not at all, and I want to disclaim anybody reading this into this. But we have to have people really talking about the value of immigrants to our society. There's a lot of talk about how immigrants hurt our society, but how much are you hearing on the other side of that debate? Much less. The debate has to be equalized in some meaningful way, all right? There's a lot of also myths out there about the cost of immigration. I remember reading an article not so long ago in the New York Times that was talking about farmers who had decided not to hire migrant or immigrant workers, but had decided to advertise their jobs in the regular newspapers in their community. And they almost lost their crops that year because they hired a lot of Americans who came to take the jobs and quit after a week because the work was too difficult. Now, I'm not making a judgment about Americans being lazy or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the expectations that we have in our society of the type of work that our kids want. They want a future that might be different than what immigrants are willing to work and do for their kids in the next generation. They've watched their parents working hard at factories or in coal mines, and they want to do something a little bit different and probably less stressful for themselves. It's not a wrong dream. That's the dream that every parent has for their child and that every child inculcates in themselves, which is, I want to do something better and I want to do something different. But that means we have needs in our society that might only be filled in certain ways by certain immigrant workers. I don't know the answer to these questions, but we have to be out there sort of engaging those issues and ensuring that our voices, ours, I mean, that of people who have a different view, are heard. And so for me, on that one issue, there are so many levels of difficulty that have to be addressed. What you have to do as an individual Latino is figure out, where do you fit into this need? And where do you want to have a leg up in it? If you look at our community, they need everything. So that really the issue is, what are you best suited to do? What motivates and makes you more impassioned? And then focus on that and try to help that issue.
Thank you very much. We're willing to work with you to come up with more solutions.
I just want to mention one thing. That I may have failed to mention before, and that is, please, no photographs.
All right. I'm not going to play the bad guy. You got to.
Oh, okay. I get to be the bad guy. Okay. We started on the right. We're going to go then to the left. Right there, next to my son and husband. Right there. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carlos. So when I graduated from high school, I modeled my speech after you. around your life, because like you, I lived in public housing, and 80% of the people from my high school did not go to college. So I thought it would be the perfect example of showing someone that no matter how much adversity they face, we overcame it all, right? And ended up now with the Supreme Court. 6 years later, I have really different feelings in the sense that when I go to advocate for more funding education, so I feel, well, if Justice Sotomayor can do it, everyone else can. But the fact is that's not the case. Most of us won't go to Princeton, won't graduate with the highest academic honor. So my question to you is, what can we do to support and empower Latinos that have potential, that can succeed, but are not 1 in a million like yourself?
I hope I'm not 1 in a million. I really. All right. No, I really hope I'm not, and I don't think I am. All right. There's a sort of continuing tension in America. It's between the image of the person who pulls themselves up by the bootstrap and the person who believes that you need a lift to get you up sometimes, okay? And how you view the world is very much in those two images. For those people who believe that everyone has to pull themselves up, they don't really believe that those people are entitled to help because they haven't done their part. For those of us who understand that sometimes, no matter how tall the heel on your boot is, the barrier is so high that you need a small lift up to help you get over it, you understand that the inequalities in society build that barrier so high that unless you do something to either knock it down a little bit or help that person up over it, they're never going to have a chance. And that's the image that I realize. I had those things. I had a unique mother who was able, through her own source of strength, to understand the benefits of education and really encourage me to use education as my lift up. But not everybody knows that or can appreciate it. Tell me, if you come from a country where only the rich ever get educated, and even when the poor are educated, the society is closed to any concept of equality, why would you ever think that educating your child here is going to result in something different? You know, you have no reason to understand that. And so if you don't have a reason to understand it, how many of our kids hear from their parents, no, you can't go to college, you have to work and support the family? Is that mean that that parent is a bad parent? No, it's a parent whose own life has constricted their understanding of opportunity. And if we don't help that parent understand it, if we don't have a teacher or someone else educating them about how to help their child and improve the quality of their parent's life, they never will. And so for me, yes, that's a constant conversation in this society. And it's one where we have to participate in changing the terms of the talk. It's not an issue about whether someone is willing to lift themselves up. It's an issue of that there are so many barriers that we have to bring down before we can change the outcomes. And so it's a very different talk for me. You're welcome.
So, right, a few rows back on the right-hand aisle, Justice, in the red.
In the red.
Yes. I feel like the blind leading the blind. It's sort of hard to say.
Thank you, Madam Justice, for being here. Very nice to meet you. My question is back on the civics education. What do schools need to do to improve access to civics classes? I remember taking civics classes, but I don't know how much they're offered anymore.
They're not. That's why we started at iCivics. Not only does iCivics have the games on the computer, the iCivics organization prepares lesson plans for teachers. And in fact, we have over, Louise, 70,000 teachers now, 155,000 teachers using our lesson plans because we understood that not enough is happening in schools. And so you can start there. Go to the icivics.org. The materials are all free. If you call us or interact with us on iCivics, we'll even find a local teacher that will help you understand the games and understand the lesson plans, because sometimes it's just easier if somebody explains it to you than if you try reading the materials and figure it out yourself. But we have the resources for that. But that's why Justice O'Connor started iCivics, because she was seeing the diminution of the teaching of civics in school. And I see it as well. And where is it taught less? In our communities, in the inner city schools. That's one of the reasons that I want to move this ELS program, English as a Second, ESL program, forward, because it's in our schools where the least teaching is happening. So thank you for caring enough to asking.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Hold on. Who's next? Thank you. Thanks, love. Who are you going to pick on next?
I'm going right left, so I would go the nearest person to your left right there, the gentleman with his hand up closest to you.
Thank you, Justice. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure. So I actually have more of a personal question for you. I was curious. I am guilty. I have not read your book, and it is on my to-do list, so I do want to admit that. But I wanted to hear a personal story from you. You know, we're so far, I'm from Miami, so I'm really far away from where I grew up and my community and those people around me. So I'm curious if there's anyone that stayed with you that you sort of think, you know, you were talking about like every night, like thinking about, am I doing enough? Is there one person in your life or even just a group of people in your life that inspire you every single day to move forward with all the advocacy work that you do and sort of the social justice work?
Oh, what an interesting question. You know, I often tell this story in other audiences, so I'll tell it here. There are two questions I pose to myself every night before I go to sleep. The first one is, what new thing have I learned today? And I try not to limit it to the law, because, you know, I'm a justice, and every day that I'm reading things, I'm learning new things, and that would be a cheat, I think. So it's usually something I've read, something I've listened to on the news that made me think a new thought. It could be anything, but it has to be something that has enriched me that day. Because the richer I am, the more I can give. And I tell kids all the time, what's the most important value of education? And it is that you become a more interesting person. You know, think about the people that you gravitate to. The people who are often leaders are the ones who have new thoughts, who have a spirit about them, about information and about engaging you. And so for me, that's an important question. The second is, who have I helped today? And if I haven't, because there are days I go into the office and I sit down at my desk and all I'm doing is working at my computer, either drafting or reading, and I get home and I go through my day, I will wake myself up and get out of bed and go to my computer and look at my messages and think about someone who's sick or someone who I know who's in need, and I reach out to them. If it's not too late, I do it with a phone call. If it's too late, I send an email, just asking how they are and how things are going. And all of us have people in that kind of need each day. But if I've done an activity, that counts, okay? Tonight will count. All right?
I'll give you that one.
Okay, tonight will count. But I don't know that I look to people to motivate me, not in those ways. I've had many mentors. You can read my book. And I've had...
It's on there, it's on there.
I have many, many mentors in my life, and people who I hear about and think they inspired me to keep going. You know, this is not a plug for any particular station, but every year I see the CNN Heroes episode, and I look at it in part only because it motivates me to continue doing what I'm doing. When I hear about these everyday, normal people who have just decided to do something extraordinary in giving in their life, and I think to myself, if they can do it, so should I. And so I'm sorry I can't mention one person, you know, who does it, but that's how I organize my life and thinking about how do I keep going. All right, hold on. No, I got it.
All right. She's the boss.
So thank you for your time. I'm actually a teacher at a little private school in Anacostia. You actually talked to our girls before. Well, really? A Washington School for Girls. Oh, I have. Yes, you have. I appreciate that, by the way, too. But my question is regarding educational equity. I know one thing I deal with constantly is students coming to school that are underprepared for the curriculum we have to teach them. And I am fortunate to be at a very small private school, but I know public schools aren't receiving the resources they need to address all the issues they have to deal with. Me personally, I'm grateful to have the largest class size of 13, but it's still exhausting dealing day by day with all the circumstances that students are bringing to the classroom. Teachers around the country, burnout rates around 3 to 5 years, so we're losing a lot of potential talent in the classroom also. I guess a question for me, teachers like me, or people around the community is, how can we as a society really push educational and equitable funding towards our inner city or rural schools to hopefully remedy all these issues?
You know, we're a crazy society. We really are. When you think about the fact that so many neighborhoods and states fund education through property taxes, and you realize that if you fund that way, you're never going to have educational equality because rich schools are going to have a lot of money and poor schools are not going to have any. And so we have to change the talk around education in understanding that it's not a local community problem, it's a much broader societal problem, and one in which the community has to take ownership of the larger society we're in. You know, there are states that have educational rights written into their constitution. We're never going to get a constitutional amendment, I don't think, in our federal system that's going to make education a right. But I think we have a shot of doing that on a lot of state levels. There are a few already that do, but not enough. And I think that that's one place we can start looking, which is opening the conversation about what is our entitlement as citizens of each state to a quality education, and looking at how education is funded and the fairness of that funding in light of the larger community that we're in. So that is a conversation that I don't have an immediate answer for, other than to say that we need to start thinking about it as education as a right. Understand that in most modern societies of today, South Africa, when they started their constitution, almost every nation that has a modern constitution, one of the first rights they list is to education. Justice Ginsburg, my colleague, when she was asked at a recent forum in abroad whether she would look to our Constitution if a new country was developing its own, and her answer was very similar to Justice Scalia's. Ours is an old, dead document. Look to South Africa, look to some of the more modern constitutions for the more current thoughts about what might be necessary as rights. Thank you. All right, I'll take one from this side and one from that side. All right, so let me start here and then I'll walk around, okay? Fine, thank you. ¿Cómo está?
Good to see you.
¿Qué tú haces aquí? Ah, hello. Who are you going to pick, love? What's my name?
She already. She's got it.
Thank you, Madam Justice, for being here. I'm very nervous being in front of you, I'll tell you. So I was hearing all the questions, and I thought, well, such a great opportunity to ask you something, right? And so I've been involved with the Latino community mostly in my university. I went to Case Western in Cleveland. So it's mostly like engineering school. And a question that sometimes, I guess, student leaders there, we ask ourselves is, having so many students that are engineering and who never learn or have learned much about social justice, them being Latino, right? Latino students who have never learned anything about social justice. Mainly my question...
Like my brother, the doctor.
Yeah, I would imagine, maybe. So we think of how can we bring the Latino community together with there being maybe such a large sector, perhaps, of the Latino community that doesn't know much about social justice. I guess, how can we think of bringing everybody together to try to bring change, right?
Mm-hmm. I do think that that's why this issue of civic education has to run throughout the curricula of students and throughout their educational life. Mm-hmm. We can't assume that we teach it in middle school and that's all kids are going to learn. They have to continue learning and relearning it in high school and in colleges and in their professional settings. Because even in engineering, and most engineers, most doctors, most anything, don't understand that every building they build makes a statement about social justice. How they approach each project in their community will either alienate the community or bring it together. And that has very little to do with race or ethnicity or with anything other than that buildings create feelings. Mm-hmm. And so if you can learn how to talk in the language of a discipline and to explain the issues that you want to communicate within that discipline, you can start engaging people in conversations about the issues that are important to you. Mm-hmm. And I know a little bit about architecture because I like it. Mm-hmm. And so I described, I think in my book, it may have ended up on the floor. I went into a Yale building, and its architecture building at the time, and I was waiting for a friend, and when she came back, I said, "Why is this place so oppressive?" And she said, "Oh my God, you feel it?" I said, "I've been sitting here and I'm feeling like I'm choking. Who built this building?" And she pulled out a book that was talking about this building and explaining that the building was oppressive to people. They had to tear it down. Wow. And start from scratch and build a completely new building for the architecture school. So I learned about that architects actually talk about these things. So, and this is a part of engineering. I think we can have these discussions if we bring to people's attention how everything they do in every discipline we have affects community, either for the positive or the negative. But if they think their profession is separate from the community, they're misguided. And so I think that's the conversation of how we can engage people in understanding that their role is bigger than just studying whatever they're studying, and thinking that whatever they do only affects themselves and their client. It affects everything around them. So, good luck. I'm glad you're thinking about it.
Thank you.
All right, voy al otro lado. All right. Who? I like walking. All right.
In the third row. Hello, dear. It's so good to see you. It's always good to see you. Your Honor, I can't wait to go home and tell my 2 kids born in Puerto Rico that I got to ride in an elevator today and meet you. As someone who's Puerto Rican, who goes back to the island several times a year, what advice do you have for us? You see what terrible situation we're in right now. What advice do you have to us in Puerto Rico, and what advice do you have to the rest of us here in the United States? And I see that our former governor, Luis Fortuño, is over there. He's been actually waving and wanting to ask for a question for a while.
¿Cómo está? No lo vi ahí entre las... No. Thank you. ¿Cómo está? I was there and I was treated to dinner. Ay, perdón, querido.
Great seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, there were 2 cases in the last couple of years involving Puerto Rico. And I dissented. Puerto Rico's situation is very difficult right now. It's perhaps the most difficult the island has ever faced. Perhaps its greatest difficulty is the brain drain that's going on there. The migration from the island out of its most educated citizens is its greatest hardship. I know because I have friends who are doctors there that the medical situation is in great, great crisis because the doctors and nurses are all leaving. We have the challenge to the educational system, which was really one of the best in all of the Caribbean world. And on par, an education in the Puerto Rican educational system of doctors and others was on par with what happened here at a much lesser cost. And that's being threatened today. That loss of hope is the thing that we need to deal with. It's almost like I want to go and say, don't give up that hope. Because just like the talk I gave earlier, which is, if we walk away, there'll be nothing left. And so we can't walk away. We have to figure out creative solutions to a very dire, dire crisis. It's not going to be easy. I'm not even pretending that there won't be great hardship. There already is. And it's going to get worse. I'm not so unrealistic that I would try to mislead people into thinking that the answers are going to be simple, or that the hardship, since I'm not suffering it, that I have a right to tell people, subject yourselves and your kids to it. I don't have that right, but I do know what the alternative is, and I can talk to them about that alternative, which is we are a proud, proud people, and we have every right to be proud. We have done some incredible things in our history and have accomplished so much. We just can't walk away from that. We have to stay and fight it. And we have to help those of us here. We have to help in every way we can. You're welcome. All right, so can you have a hug? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
As a pushy Puerto Rican.
Abigail is so upset.
No, I'm not upset, but as a pushy Puerto Rican, I'm going to encourage you to come back to the stage because we have a party to go to after this, and I think everybody would.
Eso es lo que quieren hacer. Quieren tomar.
No. Queremos festejar contigo.
All right.
So
you can see how unelegant I am about that.
You're marvelous. Isn't she wonderful? You're marvelous. So I just want to thank you all again for joining us tonight for this conversation with a truly wise Latina. On an issue that we are both very passionate about, which is ensuring that all Americans have the opportunity to participate in our democracy.
If we do, it's a true democracy. When we stop doing it, it stops being ours.
Mm-hmm. And I also, before we conclude, have to thank some of the people who made today possible. Of course, the small but mighty Latinos and Society team based here in Washington. Sarah Alvarez and Haley Lewis and Maria Samaniego. I don't know where they all are. There they are. Over to the right, my right. And also from the Justice's office. There was a former staff member of the Justices, Ileana Cruz Marden, who helped to start this process with us. And then she passed it along to Victoria Gomez, who took us to where we are today. They both were a delight to work with. Thank you very much. And all of the Aspen Institute volunteers as well, who are here today.
That is the best civic involvement.
There you go. We've got quite a few volunteers on their Friday night taking time out of their family lives and their busy lives. So now just please join me in thanking Justice Sotomayor one more time for her service. I'm gonna get up. You stay safe. You heard her call to action. There's something that every one of us can do. You can bring iCivics to your children at home. You can take a child to get engaged in civic opportunity. You can personally get involved. You can volunteer. The time is now. It's never been more important. So,
and those little things, that's on top of the big things. All of us who have been given the privilege of education, the privilege of knowledge, we have an obligation to pass it on and to pay it forward.
Yeah.
And that's an obligation that is both moral, but more importantly, it has to be within the seeds of your stomach. It has to be something that fuels your heart every day. Because without it, there is very little meaning to your existence. Those of us who are blessed, pass your blessings on. So, do the little things and do the big things too.
Well said, well said. So we are going to head next door for the reception. I ask you all to please remain seated for just a second when the Justice and I walk off the stage. But I'm going to, in true Aspen fashion, leave you with just a few words from the poet Wendell Berry, from the poem Think Little, before we head out. So while government is studying and funding and organizing its big thought, nothing is being done. But the citizen who's willing to think little and accepting the discipline of that to go ahead on his own is already solving the problem. A man who's trying to live as a neighbor to his neighbors will have a lively and practical understanding of the work of peace and brotherhood. And let there be no mistake about it, he's doing that work. Thank you.